Welcome to the Trailblazing Texas podcast, where we embark on a journey through our diverse Texas landscapes and breathtaking trails while always engaging with our amazing Texas hiking community. So settle in, tighten up those bootlaces, and get ready for the thrilling tales awaiting for you on this episode.
It was because there are parts you're like, okay, in your shoes you got decent grip, but so many, it's the same trail and the same cables. Well, maybe not the same cables, but it's the same pathway basically for years and years and years. So that granite has become
Yeah,
somewhat slick just from the number of bodies on it every day.
yeah,
And so there were parts where you were definitely clinging onto the cables because your feet were just, as you're trying to go up and they're just slipping, and you're making like very little gain except what your arms are pulling. Um, and so every, I don't know, 10 to 20 feet, they have a board across between the poles because they haven't like, I don't know if it's in May or early June. They put the cables are up year round, but then the Park Service will go put these cables up that
yeah,
hold support and they do that in maybe later May or June. But anyway, we had the cables up, but then there's these boards that you give you some sort of a stopping point.
yeah,
Um, so you could go up 10, 20 feet, stop on one of those boards between some of the poles and kind of catch your breath, look around, and go up another 10 to 20 feet. But it was there were definitely a few parts of that part on the cables that the anxiety and the heart starts a pumping. But it was an
yeah.
incredible hike. And so that was something though I will never forget. But
And
then
isn't it
we
a long hike to even get to it?
it is, but we got lucky. So my friend had won permits through the lottery system, like
Mm-hmm.
in March or early April, whenever they announced those. Well, 1 week out from our trip, they released so many permits a week before that you want to try to shoot for, and I was able to get wilderness permits,
Oh,
which
okay.
that allowed us to go up over halfway to a backpackers camp called Little Yosemite Valley.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people do it in one day and it's like 16 miles, but we were able to go just over halfway and spend the night. And then that next morning, wake up fresh to hit actual Half Dome and then come down from Half Dome and stay another night. Because if you, there's certain, you can, there's certain trailheads, I should say, there's certain wilderness permits and they're based from different trailheads. And if you land a wilderness permit from, 3 different trailheads, then that just automatically gives you a Half Dome permit to add on. So anyway, we hit. Long story short, my friend had won some permits, but then when a week out, I won wilderness permits. Those came with their own Half Dome permit. So anyway, we had extra permits, which we were able to leave with there's a ranger at the beginning of what they call the subdome who checks for permits.
Yeah.
And we told her there were extras, so that way anyone that showed up who didn't have a permit could use our extra permits.
Oh, that's
And
nice.
as luck would have it, we passed a gentleman coming up from Scotland who was hiking all the way up there for the chance to maybe get up to Half Dome. And we told him, hey, talk to the ranger. We just left 4 permits up there, and she'll let you up. And so we made his day for sure.
Oh, nice. I know, like one of my most memorable hikes was on Tejas, and I have it on video where my wife said, "This is the this is the point in the hike where I really hate my husband." Yeah. So,
You do get those moments, don't you, where there's
oh
that
man,
one
yeah.
point.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think
Yeah.
everybody in my family has hated me at one point while we were hiking. So, what do you think is your most difficult backpacking trip in Texas or hiking trip?
Well, difficult. I have to stick with Guadalupe Peak because it is a killer. And what got me is that final 3/4 of a mile at the end.
Yeah.
Um, you know, And what it is, and I'm sure people, if you've read or researched it, you'll hear about that first 3/4, and it's the same the last 3/4 of a mile you're going down. It's just some steep steps. That last section coming down is what converted me to trekking poles. You know, uh, I'm older, and I know you hear the benefits. Even if you're in your 20s, they say you should use trekking poles because, hey, if something can take a little pressure off your knees over miles and miles and miles, why the heck not do it? Well,
Absolutely.
I had kind of resisted it and resisted it. But after coming down that Guadalupe Peak Trail, and where each step down, and again, they were steep steps, each step down was kind of jarring on my knees. Uh, it was tough for me for a Texas hike. That was my toughest hike, and it was funny. I get in the car and start driving back to Amarillo after I did that hike, and of course legs were jelly. But
And
what? Oh, go ahead.
no, like, and so you sit there for a couple hours and then you try to move when you go to a gas station or
Oh,
something, and
exactly. That's what I was going to say. So I got in the car, I took off, I drove to uh, Muleshoe, Texas, and I stopped at an Allsup's convenience store. And I tried to get out of my truck and I could not walk. My legs had stiffened and tightened up. And so there were people in the truck next to me watching this guy try to get out of his car. And I was like hobbling my way into the store because of sitting for so long. You do this
you
killer hike and then you sit for hours. And oh my goodness, lesson learned.
and they're like, "Look at that guy! Call the cops! He's drunk."
Yeah, exactly. It had to be hilarious. I was laughing, but it also hurt.
So, what are some him? You were talking about earlier. You've discovered some really cool places. So, what are some hidden gems or secret spots that you've discovered while hiking in Texas? You don't have to give the locations, but like,
Yeah.
I found
Well,
this, or
yeah, well, my bread and butter's up here in the Panhandle, and
right.
Paladuro and Caprock and Pole Canyon are littered with some slot canyons, and some people know that, and some people don't know. And these are a couple of them are Utah/Arizona style slot canyons, that good.
Wow.
And there's a couple, and these are within the park boundary. There's several outside the park boundaries and what they call the restricted zone, but within the park boundary there's a couple of areas that you can go, and just these amazing slots, sandstone slots for the most part. There's some gypsum slots from a gypsum layer. And so at Paladuro, there's a couple of really good slot canyons, and some are pretty small, like maybe 5 to 6 feet, but then some get up there over, I don't know, 30, 40 feet tall, and you're walking through, and it feels like you are in the Utah desert somewhere. Um, but it's very cool. So there's those, and then there's some hidden. I mean, some waterfalls that now most of the time they're dry. What we would consider dry falls,
Yeah.
but you get a spring flowing, and you'll see a little waterfall dripping off, or under those dry falls there's usually a bunch of ferns growing up from underneath a dry fall, and those are usually seeping and dripping water.
Yeah.
So there's some of those good spots. um, uh, so yeah, there's quite a bit scattered out. And for me, I'm not necessarily a gatekeeper, and don't tell anyone this, don't tell anyone that. But no one gave me the info. I knew people who knew, and basically, you can just pop on a lot of this stuff. You can pop up Google satellite images. That's what I did for me to locate. There's random YouTube videos on some of these spots out there that kind of give you bits and pieces. Uh, but um, but what I did is I just started looking at satellite images, and I thought, hey, that looks like something.
And
And then
to me, I think I agree with you 100%. And to me, maybe I'm even a little more harsh. Is I think you have to earn it. And I
yeah,
think you need to, whether it's research, whether it's whatever it is, getting out there on the trail and trying to find it or something. But like, I think our society is, I think a big issue is that sometimes things are just given, and and when they're given, I don't know that you really respect it.
True.
Like if you earn something, and like me finding Jose's grave, all the research that I did and the time that I spent, and then going out to find it, um it's a value to me, and it means so much to me to go visit him that I pick up trash along the trail to get to him,
Yeah.
and I don't know that. I mean, I think normally I pick up trash on the Lone Star hiking trail when I hike it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would have done that, and I don't know really that. I don't know. I just think that yeah, that if you want something, go get it.
Yeah.
Don't
Do a
just
little
wait for.
work.
Yes.
Yeah, do a little work, and then then there are issues with trash and graffiti at some of these places, and so there's just got to be a respect for the land, the nature, and but
And I think the people that probably would spend the time to research it and stuff aren't the people that are going to be, just, graffitiing and trashing up the places.
yeah, I agree with you on
Yeah.
that. But yeah, there are, and so again, my experience mainly is here in the Panhandle, but there are spots that you can find just that take you to another world, like you mentioned the Notch, and you see something, and so you look at Paladuro or Cap Rock, and you think, okay, this is cool, this is beautiful, but then you get to this little corner or this little nook, and
You know,
it may be a waterfall, it may be a slot, it could just be a saturated area where you enter a jungle out of the kind of the Panhandle arid area, and now you're in this jungly area.
yeah, it's like Caprock. You have that fern, the fern cave.
Uh-huh.
Like you're like, where am I at? This isn't out in the
Exactly.
desert. So, do you have any I would call it common misconceptions about hiking in Texas that you have to debunk with people that you meet. And like, so Todd brought up a great one in the next, or in the two episodes ago, was about, you know, people, like, Texas doesn't have mountains. Well, we do. We have a lot of mountains. And they're beautiful and they're spectacular. One of mine is, you see on these hiking groups on Texas, is everybody is, what kind of hiking boot should I get, or do I need? And I'm always like, man, the only time you need a hiking boot is if maybe you're off trail at Big Bend or Guadalupe, maybe it would make sense to have a hiking boot, but you should have a comfortable tennis shoe trail runner, um, and and that you'd be perfectly fine. So do you have
Yeah.
anything that you would like to, let's say it's a new
Well,
listener and are new to hiking or backpacking, anything that you would like to?
yeah. Well, the mountain thing, yeah, you hear people talk about Texas, and a lot of folks may not realize that they'll say, oh, there's just not a lot of elevation or gain, or like you said, no mountains. So, I've had people ask about that, and they're surprised when they hear about Guadalupe Peak and the mountains and the hill country. And, there are areas that there's quite a bit of elevation.
Yeah.
So there's that. People talk about, hiking in Texas and, the heat. And I'm like, well, that's true, especially come summertime. But you've got, at least maybe not where you're at, but up here for hiking, mornings and evenings are absolutely spectacular in the
Yeah.
heat. Even on triple digit days, we'll have a lot of 100+ days every summer. But if you get out for an early morning hike or a late evening hike or even a night hike, it is very comfy.
Okay. So what are the temperatures then? In the 80s, maybe? Like they drop down to,
Now,
you would think?
yeah, they'll drop down to mid to upper 60s in
What?
nighttime. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, very comfortable. And it's the dry heat we have.
Right,
We
right,
don't have that
right.
humidity. Now sometimes it can get humid up here. It's rare, but then we all are like we don't know what to do. We're freaking out, but
Yep.
no, 95% of the time it's that dry air. And so what happens is once the sun goes down, is there's an immediate cooling in the air. Like we have a drive-in theater here in town, and people usually have to take blankets in the middle of summer for the
Really?
drive-in movie theater because the sun goes down and the breeze with the light, it's always windy up here, and um, you get chilled. You're like, wow, where's a little blanket or something?
I would have never guessed.
Yeah, so that's one. And you mentioned the shoes. Yes, that's something. I mean, I don't want to keep just repeating everything, but yeah, for for me personally, I wear boots if I go off trail, and it's because of the pokey things.
Yep.
Everything will poke you and stick you,
Yep.
and I love forever and ever. I just use tennis shoes, and I did have a couple of cactus quills go through those,
Yep.
um, but if I'm staying on trail, I've got my trail runners. Benefit of those, if you're on a trail, tennis shoes, trail runners for someone new getting into this, just do that. And it's comfortable, it's light. Plus, most tennis shoes and trail runners are half the weight of your uh, hiking boots. And so, if
Oh,
you're
yes.
going to be hiking several miles, you're saving maybe a pound and a half on each, well, on your feet together.
Yep. Yep. So let's say you're getting ready for a long day hike. What are some of the essential items that you carry in your backpack?
Well, I've got my phone and my apps. I'm a Gaia app person. You hear people use Gaia or All
Yep.
Trails or Onyx. For me, I just I'm a Gaia person. I love it. I've always used it. So I've got that, and then I do carry for important for me is a battery bank and cords. You
Yeah.
got to have those extra cords.
And not to interrupt, but the episode that I just dropped today with Mr. Barry, he didn't have a phone charger, and when he got lost in Guadalupe, his phone died, and that was the first or second thing that he bought, after he was rescued
After,
was the GPS tracker and a phone bank. I mean,
wow,
a phone bank, a charging bank.
yeah, I can't wait to hear those interviews. Yeah, it's important. I've almost had my parents one time almost called the sheriffs to come look for me because my cell phone had died. I had a battery bank with me, a charging bank,
Yeah.
but it wasn't charged. Go figure. So, but it was getting into. Well, what made it worse is I
Wait, so hold
used my
on. Just a step back. Okay, do you tell did you tell them you were going out hiking, or they just like, wait, I haven't heard from Kip in a while.
No, they knew. Yeah, they knew I was going. Me and my friend went out, and
How old were
my
you?
phone, huh?
How old were you? How long ago was
Oh
this?
gosh, this was just within the last 5 years.
Oh, okay.
It's a couple of years. It wasn't. Doesn't seem like it was that long ago. But me and my friend, we go out into the back country. We're going out. We're exploring, and my phone died. Well, I hook up my battery bank, and I was like, oh crap, it's not charged. And so my phone dies. I used my friend's phone. He had service at the moment because the service was spotty. And I
Yeah.
texted my mom. I said, "Hey, my phone's dead. Don't worry. I'll be back to my truck in an hour and a half." And that's where I really screwed up, is telling
Yeah.
her I would be.
You
I didn't know when I was going to be back.
you committed to a time.
Yeah. And so that's the last she knew. And then next thing you know, it's like 3 hours later and no one's heard from me. And so anyway, after that, I make sure my battery bank is charged, but I make sure I have one, and I do have the GPS, the Garmin Mini
Right.
for a bunch of different, a lot of our state parks I feel have phone service or maybe even spotty service, but I have the that satellite messenger now with me, so
Any
I
other
love it. I
items that
have it.
you
I've
think?
never really had to use it. Oh yeah, so I've got, of course, First aid, sunscreen, bug spray. I carry a water filter, even though I may be somewhere where there's no water in sight. I have a little Sawyer water filter, and this bag I love. It's called, I don't know if it's pronounced Cnock or Snock,
Yeah,
but
Sonok.
CNOK. It's just a easy to fill and use with a Sawyer filter. My headlamp, a knife, and I usually carry a sun hoodie with me to wear.
Yeah,
Of course, I have a cap on. Sun protection is important, even for those youngsters listening.
yeah,
And so, sun hoodies have become a hiking staple for a lot of people. And because even on the hot summer days, usually they're breathable material, SPF 30-ish,
yeah.
uh, and just good protection for you.
One item I think you would never think about, and it's probably one of the most important because when things go wrong, the headlamp.
Yes.
I don't care that you're hiking during the day. Like, Mr. Barry, he got lost. He was out there for 5 days, and to have a headlamp, and it's vital, and that has been hard for me to learn, but it absolutely it's in my day pack,
Yeah.
always.
To touch on that, I've made a switch to my headlamp, and I'm not sure if I like it or if I'm adjusting. So I've always had a good headlamp, and I carried spare batteries. But now I've gone to a chargeable headlamp, and it's worked well. And of course, I have a battery bank as long as it's charged.
Right.
But it's just different because when my old headlamp, I knew I had that set of batteries with me. And then when this rechargeable, I just haven't used it enough to be comfortable. Like, oh yeah, this is going to last 10 hours, or this will last all
Yeah.
night. So I'm working on it though. So
Yeah, I use both, and I don't know if you can see. There's a little blue light right here.
yep, I can see it.
I have those rechargeable batteries for my headlamps, and they're in a battery bank charger. But
Oh, okay.
I have a couple of headlamps that are chargeable, and I like them. I haven't had any issues with them, like not lasting as what I would expect. Um, yeah, so I'm a fan of them. Have you ever tried or heard about Trucker Joe's and their water bottle sleeve holders?
I think well, I've seen a post from you.
Those things are game changers.
Yeah.
And so let's say you're on a long water carry, you have all the water in your hip belt or in your backpack, and of course it's weight.
Uh-huh.
I have I don't know, probably 6 of those things on all my backpacks, and you can have, like, one water bottle here or 2 water bottles on the shoulder straps. As you're hiking, you don't have to stop and take off your backpack to try to reach the water. Um, you can just grab it with one hand, unscrew, drink. You don't have to stop. And then the weight distribution of having 2 liters here or 1 liter here, and then the other water on your hips. It is night and day.
Oh, we'll have to check into that.
I'll definitely send you a link. I mean, this piece of gear, and like I've said in other episodes, I'm a kind of like a gear nerd. So if it's expensive and ultralight, I'm usually suckered in, and none of those have changed my life as it relates to hiking and backpacking than this little piece of gear. It is
Oh,
absolutely incredible.
definitely send that over.
Now, I'll definitely do it for sure. So, can you share any funny or unexpected moments that you've experienced while hiking?
Well, I have unexpected. What pops to mind is hiking out at Lake Meredith here in the Panhandle, and this wasn't a funny unexpected, but I was with my dog Sasha. She's my
Hmm.
rescue mutt, and she's the best hiking partner there is. And but she takes off after something. I could tell she was sniffing around trying to find something, and she takes off and chases down. Here comes a huge burly porcupine
Oh
trying to
no.
run out of some rocks. and I'm hollering at her, Sasha, don't come here, Sasha, Sasha. And the porcupine was so big, he was moving. It looked like slow motion. He was trying to run, but it just looked like slow motion. Anyway, Sasha got into that porcupine and starts yelping, and she comes over to me, and I'm probably a couple of miles from my truck, and she comes up to me with a mouth full of quills.
Oh no.
And I was not prepared. I did not know what to do, and it looked terrible. And they were in her tongue, all in
Oh
her
my
gums.
gosh.
And so, she laid down and she knew I was trying to help. And so I'm down there trying to pull those out. I wasn't sure what the protocol was, what I needed to do. And of course, there's blood and saliva, and I'm trying to pull these out, and she's letting me. And anyway, it was quite as far as something unexpected that you could run into with the dog. Um,
So did
she's
you get them
okay.
all out?
I did, and I kept an eye. I took her to the vet later,
Yeah,
once we
yeah.
got the next day, but I did get them all out there, and it was not easy. Those things are in tight.
Absolutely.
Um, Uh, so I got them all out. Then later, next day, took her to the vet. Everything checked out and everything was good. But that was something that I was not preparing for that day. And she was a trooper. And we've been back out to that spot since then. And I think she remembered it because she didn't go mess around these. This was kind of a rock outcropping,
Yeah.
and but that was unexpected. And then um, another item was unexpected type situation was last summer we're hiking. We had finished coming down the cables at Half Dome, and we're standing at the base just looking up, and we hear a phone. Someone dropped a phone and it started sliding down the granite.
Of
Well,
Half
this
Dome?
guy at Half Dome, and this guy decides he's going to get his phone. His phone is too valuable for him to, basically save keep his life. So he's going to risk his life for this phone. And there were a decent amount of people there, and people are hollering, "Don't do it! Don't!" There's other options. And this guy leaves the cables and it's just
Jeez.
kind of looks like Spider-Man. I kind of wondered if we were going to witness someone die. There were a couple of people who couldn't watch; they couldn't look. It was that intense, that scary. And as he's kind of kind of reverse Spider-Man, kind of squatting with all force, trying to wiggle his way down, he slides at one point.
Oh my
And
gosh.
oh, you talk about heart racing, and we're all anyway. He got the phone. He made it, and but you talk about something that just scared the life out of a bunch of people, and someone risking their life for a phone. It was crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah, because it
Man.
he dropped it. He was up a ways, and it dropped, and it slid. I don't know, maybe 40 yards down and to the left off from where the cables were. And then this guy decides to come down and try to retrieve it. It was just wild.
Can you imagine if he would have slipped?
Oh, I know. We kind of thought that was going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can't you guys have porcupines up there?
we do. Now, what's funny is you usually see them in the fall and winter because, uh, do y'all have mistletoe down there? In the trees?
I
I
think
know up
so.
in
Yeah,
northern
yeah.
Texas. Anyway, you're hiking or walking along, and the trees have lost their leaves, and you see this. It looks like mistletoe, a gathering
Right.
of or a giant nest, and it's these porcupine. That's how you. It's easy to find them. You just, I mean, they're not common to see, but you just see this big thing up in the tree, and it's a porcupine, and they're eating the bark.
They climb trees?
They do.
Oh
They can
my
climb
gosh.
high too. But yeah,
Wow.
I've run into probably three at Paladuro, and then not far from here is called Greenbelt Lake or Greenbelt Reservoir, or whatever you want, however you want to phrase it. There, I've run into probably five porcupines. So yeah, they're up here.
Do they care about you? Like if you're walking?
No, they don't. They always seem to be like a sloth. I mean, they're up
Yeah.
there. They just kind of look, and they always seem to be moving kind of slow, and they just kind of turn. They're up above you, 30 feet above you, and they're just kind of slowly turn their head, look at you, slowly turn back to the bark, and start chewing on it.
Wow. So, do you have any other wildlife experiences in all your hiking?
I've come across a couple of bears from a distance,
Yeah.
but
At
nothing's
Big
to.
Ben?
No, one uh, northern New Mexico, the Red River area, and
Oh,
then last
wow.
summer in Yosemite, bear, and then at Paladuro, we were already in the car exiting the park, but I was so pumped, so excited, we got to witness a bobcat walking along the creek there,
Oh,
so that was
man.
pretty cool.
My dream is to run in not I don't know about run into, but see a mountain lion at Guad. I've
Yes.
seen, we've like it snowed the night before and we're out the top of Tejas kind of heading down to the campsite of Tejas and we've stumbled across mountain lion tracks where Mr. Barry got lost. There were a couple of sets of mountain lion tracks that it looked
Oh,
like
wow.
they were following following, some deer. And what's funny is I don't know if it's in part one that we just released of Mr. Barry and I's interview or it's in part two, but when he was rescued, the Park Service told him where he was at is heavily populated with mountain lion because no one
Wow.
ever goes back there. And he's like, "Man, I sure am glad that I didn't know that at the time I was lost."
Oh, so happy he survived that. Wow.
Man, yeah.
And we do have some, there are mountain lion here. Well, let me back up. So my first time to Guadalupe, it was the New Year's Day hike up the peak,
Mm-hmm.
and I started in the dark. And the one thing that was ringing in my mind is I had a friend who had seen a mountain lion on that trail before. This was
Really?
like 2 or 3 years before.
Right,
But that was
right.
the one thing. So I'm starting this hike. I've got my night light on or my headlamp, and I'm starting this. It's pitch black, and I'm just thinking, oh, remember Brent saw a mountain lion up here a couple of years ago. um, and then there's
So,
some up here in the Panhandle. I mean, they've been spotted on game cams. I don't know if anyone's like in Paladuro. They're in the canyon or can be, and down there at Caprock. I don't know if like a visitor or has ever really seen one live, but game cams and some of those deer feeders have cameras on them.
yeah.
And so there's been pictures.
So Henning and I are talking about heading back. I don't know when, either in October or February, back to the northern back part of the park, where kind of the Bush Mountain Trail goes up and runs into Tejas in that area,
Uh-huh.
and staying out for a couple of days. It's going to be a heavy water carry, and just sitting up on the hill and just seeing if we can see one off of the distance. And Henning was a Marine sniper, so he has like the spotting scopes and all this kind of stuff. So that's something that we're kind of kicking
Oh,
around. I think would be,
you got to do that. Wouldn't that be something to see one?
man, can you imagine? Yeah, I can't wait. So next kind of question, what advice do you have for any beginners who want to start this hobby of ours of hiking and backpacking?
Yeah, well, a couple of things that come to mind. The first I laugh at is hands, feet, and butt. Hands, feet, and butt. That's what I told my kids growing up. And that's what I told my girlfriend when
Yeah,
she started hiking. So that's what I tell people when you go start your hiking is you've got your hands, your feet, and your butt, and you need to use them all when you're hiking.
yeah.
And so anyway, I have to chuckle. That's my first response: hands, feet, and butt. Um, And so, because you do, especially if you're parts, there's certain parts of trails that can be slippery and
Hmm.
or steep. And hey, steep, scared, nervous, just sit down on that behind,
Yep.
inch your way down on your butt. So anyway, but there's that, and then go out and just do it. I'm sure people
Yes.
walk around their neighborhood, their park,
Yes.
find find somewhere, start with an easy or a short trail, or start a big trail and just go in 5 minutes and come back. Um, I would recommend for someone, I mean, if you don't have a hiking partner or friend that's into it or down with it, look into a hiking group. There most areas, we have our friends with the Midland Odessa hiking group. Um, in Amarillo, there's what's called the Amarillo Hiking Club, which is a meetup group. If you've ever
Hmm.
used Meetup, and so there's these groups all around the state that you can join up. Super friendly, super nice people, always down for a hike, an adventure, and just really and welcoming open arms to newbies, new people that are giving it a shot.
Absolutely, and that was my next question actually is would you recommend any groups? And exactly what you said, you could just go to Facebook and search whatever city you're living in and hiking, and you would
Right.
probably going to find two or three. There's a big one in San Antonio. Down here, there's one in Houston. There's the Lone Star Hiking Trail Club. I mean, I think exactly what you said. Just get out and do it. You don't have to have fancy gear. You don't have to have. You don't even have
Yeah.
to have any gear to go walking. Just a comfortable pair of shoes. Now it's
Yeah. And that
nice to have a backpack and that can hold your water, and it's nice to have some water. But just like a short little hike, I mean, just get out and do it.
exactly. And that's my next point was as far as cost. You hear some different things on cost of hiking, backpacking, and it can get up there crazy prices, but you can get started for nothing. I mean, wear your tennis shoes, use a school backpack. I mean, you may not want to, but you can.
Yeah,
Um, and like for me, I'm I'm a tightwad, and so I don't like to spend money. And so most of my hiking, backpacking, camping, car camping, almost all my gear originally came from the old Craigslist,
yeah,
Facebook Marketplace, ads, you name it. Goodwill or thrift stores like Goodwill. I can't tell you how many things I have bought that are used. Some of my shirts that I have and wear
yeah,
are from eBay, used.
yeah,
My I just got rid of my Tevas or Tevas. I think they're pronounced Tevas. My sandals, hiking sandals. I bought those $30 off of eBay used, and my friends and I joke about, probably what's in those shoes, the stink in those shoes. But anyway, so you can get started for almost nothing, and use Facebook Marketplace. I'm in
yeah,
Amarillo, and many people are in much more populated areas, and I can find some of the big name backpacking ultralight stuff for sale used in Amarillo. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of wild. But yeah, you can get in on the cheap. And now the last couple of years, a couple of things I actually have splurged a little for: a
that
tent, a
tent.
backpack,
Yep.
sleeping pad. But I didn't have to. It's just
Yeah,
that I had a good tax refund or whatever.
yeah.
So I have bought a couple of new things that were a little pricey. But again, I didn't have to do it. Uh, I was fine with my old used stuff. So yeah, you guys think about that, check it out. And as far as joining in a group, if you're by yourself, it can be intimidated for like me to want to join this group of strangers. You have this mindset that everyone knows everyone.
Right.
And that's partially true, but usually there's always people there who don't know each other or who
Yeah.
are new like you showing up. So why not just go? Of course, it's a little nerve wracking, but you'll meet these people that share a love for the outdoors, that love giving advice and helping, and you'll make some great friends.
And and from like a woman's perspective, some of these groups offer only women hikes. So, you don't have to worry about some creepoid being there and bothering you and stuff. Like, if that would make you feel comfortable, like they do offer only women hikes, and then, sometimes group hikes where it's men and women, but like, so
Oh, very true.
that shouldn't
Yeah, the
be a reason
I would
for you
say,
not to.
even up here in the Panhandle, the women's hiking movement is strong,
Yeah.
and some very, very strong adventurous women. And so, yes, yes, there's lots of opportunity for that.
Yeah, I'm part of that Midland Odessa hiking group, and Theresa I think she was one of the creators. They're always out hiking, and it's usually just her and her girlfriends, and I mean they're doing Wheeler Peak, and like they're not doing just wimpy hikes. They're doing hikes of all abilities.
Yeah, it looks like fun. I have not. We've communicated with the group, with the group and some of the members,
Yeah.
but I've yet to meet. But one of these days, the stars will align, and I'll get to hang out with them.
Yeah. Oh, there we they. It was funny. Henning and I were going to do. It was on my quest to do the 10 highest peaks in Texas, and I think it was the last one. It was Mount Livermore, Baldy Peak. It's like number 7 or something. And I was talking about the trip, and like their group met me there, and they were parked in front of us in the line
Oh, no
to get
way.
into the gate. We were the second car, they were the first car, and Michael gets out of the car and he walks back to our car, and I'm like, okay, what is this? And he's like, are you Jason? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, hey, we're the, the, we're from the Midland Odessa hiking group. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And it ended up being me and Henning, and then there was one, two, three, four, five, like 6 or 7 other people from that group that we ended up hiking with, and had a blast. Had an absolute
Oh,
blast.
yeah, that is awesome that you got to do that and meet them. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So as we kind of start to wrap up, can you give one or two suggestions for any new hikers that some family friendly state parks?
Yeah, well, here again in Palo Duro, there are some family-friendly hikes. There's a couple of trails, the Kiowa Trail, Cottonwood, the Sunflower. At least if you're up in these parts, those are good family-friendly, kids of young ages, where you get to walk. Some of those are there's some good shade. You're along the creek on and off. And then there's what's called they call it the big cave that you see from the road. It looks like this ginormous cave. It's a short walk, and that would give young ones a chance to go up and down and get dirty and get on some of there's some up and downs there, and you can kind of get into that cave. It's not a true cave, but it looks like it, and they call it the big cave. And it's right off the road. A lot of people stop there with families. Um, and then, of course, at Lake Meredith, there's the Alabates Visitor Center. They have a trail right there called the Mesquite Trail, which is good for families and family fun. I tell you what, Lake Meredith is a hidden gem if anyone ever comes up to the Panhandle, because you got the
I've never
areas.
heard of it. Yeah, so
Yeah, there's the lake, which
yeah.
we almost lost it back in 2012 due to the drought, but
Hmm.
it made a recovery. It went down to like 24 feet or 26 feet in depth when now it's been sitting the last few years at about 75 to 80 feet deep.
Oh wow.
Um, and but there are established trails, and one cool thing is away from the water is this huge recreational area where there's trails, there's roads you can drive around. um, there's just a lot you can do at Lake Meredith, whether you're a serious hiker or just taking the kids out.
And
So
and would you say, or would you recommend family friendly for like Paladuro or Caprock, or do you think that's probably a little too much?
No, Paladuro, those trails I mentioned earlier for Paladuro and Caprock has a cool, yeah, Caprock. You got to take the kids to Caprock. As you know,
Yeah.
the unique thing about Caprock is the free roaming bison, or I
Yes.
call them buffalo.
So do
And
I.
so they are everywhere. Well, it depends on the time of year, but most of the time you go and you're going to run into them, and a lot of times you'll have a traffic jam. They're crossing the road or meandering along the road, and you just have to sit and wait. But that is so cool. My kids, the first time they saw that, they just lit up. I think anyone, regardless of age, you're driving down a road and then you're in the middle, buffalo to your left and right. It's just something to see.
And even the prairie dogs are fun. Like, like as you get
Yeah,
into the park, they have that prairie dog town.
giant prairie dog village,
Yeah.
and yeah, just watching them, they're all peeking out or standing up. What's unique, what's kind of interesting about that prairie dog village, I didn't know this until my brother had told me. He got to talk to a wildlife photographer, and what she would do, she sets up her cameras on the outskirts of the prairie dog village because owls will kind of lay and hide out around the village, either in low-lying shrubs, trees, or the weeds, whatever. But they're just kind of hanging out, waiting to grab a prairie dog meal.
Are you kidding?
No, no,
Oh
it's
my
pretty wild.
gosh.
I don't know if it's that great horned owl. I don't know the species of owl, but yeah, they'll apparently the owls like the prairie dog village as well.
In Guadalupe, they have I don't know if it's called a bush owl, but they have, because around Pine Springs and stuff, you get in, it's not very tall trees and stuff there, but there's owls there too. Yeah, I don't know what species, but I got those poor prairie dogs. They're
Yeah,
so
they're so
cute.
cute.
So for the new hiker and backpacker, what is one piece of gear that you would recommend that's a must have? I know we talked about some gear and stuff, but like what is just that one piece that if they're going to invest anything in that you would recommend?
Well, a couple of things come to mind. I mean, one, I think get an app on your phone um, for anyone hiking. There's the all, as we mentioned earlier, All Trails, Gaia, and Onyx, and then there's others as well.
Yeah.
But if you get those app, and they all have a free version, I believe.
Yeah.
That's no cost, and they'll have maps, and they have almost all the national and state parks marked and the trails marked. So even, it's kind of good comfort. Even if it's a short hike you're on, you could just pull up your phone, if you have cell phone service, that is. Now, many of these apps you can download your offline maps. So
Yeah.
basically, if you know you're going to be somewhere where there's no cell service, you can download the maps ahead of time, which takes you 20 seconds. And then, yeah, you can be anywhere you want and pull up your map, see where you're at on the trail. But and then from there, I think, there's just the basic first aid kit. They have what they call the 10 essentials, but the
Yeah.
one piece of all of that, for me, it's the app, and it would be my first go-to for someone, a
Getting
newbie wanting to
comfortable
get
with
out
that.
there.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
was
just so
telling
you have your
Mr.
bearings.
Barry, we were talking about first aid kits, and I'm like, I have a lighter in my first aid kit. If I'm lost out in Guadalupe Mountains, we're going to have a Laminate control burn. I'm sending up some smoke signals.
That's a that's a good idea.
Yeah.
That is. And like we talked with him and earlier, so an app and then a backup battery or a battery pack or what I call battery bank, that would be a piece as well.
Yeah.
But you also want to always be alert, have a, you want a lighter or matches for emergencies. Of course, water filtration. I mean, we could go on and on, but if I had to pick
Yeah.
one piece, I would say the app and battery pack, because unless there'd be definitely more you'd need if you're going further.
All right. And then the last question is, what is one piece of safety advice that you would give to a new hiker and backpacker? And I'm going to go first on this one. I would definitely say stay away from water bladders. For the love of everything holy, stay away from water bladders.
Well,
Every dangerous situation that I've been in, that I've been with people, have been because they are using a water bladder. Logically, you have all your water in one bag. If it leaks, if it pops, you're in trouble. You have
yeah,
no visibility of how much water you have. As usually I'm with people that I might be more experienced with. I want to see how much water you have because I usually carry extra water and I want to know how fast you're going through this water. Like you said, you bring a water filter. Let's say my bladder leaks and I put duct tape on it because that should be in your first aid kit, or it was punctured, or whatever, and I lose all this water, and then I find a nice little stream of water. How am I going to filter that water from a bladder?
yeah, true. Well, you kind of touched on my what? Well, it's yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because my safety advice for someone new is take more water than you think you'll need, and I mean that very seriously
Yes.
because you know here and again at Paladuro in my neck of the woods. Almost every summer, not every, but it's every other maybe, we lose somebody. Someone dies from heat exhaustion. And you'll see people go out there and they'll hike the Lighthouse Trail, one of the most popular trails. It's 6.1 miles round trip, and you'll see them, a group of people each with one bottle of water, and it's just crazy in the summertime. Well, even in the springtime, it's crazy to do that, but it happens a time and time again. There have been many deaths over the span of 10, 20 years, um, and so take more water than you need. Um, that's just so important because I've run into people who've kind of shot themselves in the foot because they didn't. And of course, luckily, me or my friends, we had water to spare and give people. Now, on the water, well, and then I should say, Paladuro has started closing trails for when the heat gets up.
That's
And
good.
I think there's a couple other places that do that too. So if they know the heat or the heat index is going to be X, they close the trails and you can't get back on the trails. It's till like I think 5 o'clock, and at 5 p.m. you are free to take, like the lighthouse and specifically that trail. If it's a high heat, high temp day, they'll close the trail and it will reopen at 5 p.m. But just take water seriously. The water bladder thing makes me laugh because I have a couple of friends in particular I've always done bottles, and I think it's bothered them. Most of my hiking friends and my hiking associates are water bladder people, and there's nothing wrong with that for them. That's their own thing. But there's a couple who are trying to convert me to bladder. In fact, last summer I got a day pack and a water bladder, and they're like, "Hey, look, here's your water bladder, and maybe you should use it." And I'm like, I don't know about that. Um, but
Walk
I'm
up with a knife, poke their bladder, and go, now what are you going to do?
yeah, I will say in my different hikes and backpacking, uh, most at least with each of my friends, at some point over the last few years, each one of them has had a bladder failure.
Yes. And then what are you going to do?
Yeah,
And like you see right behind me, these are all smart water bottles that I have, and I reuse them. And guess
yeah,
what? If I'm carrying 3 or 4 liters of water in my Trucker Joe's shoulder water bottle, excellent gear, and one of those leaks, one of those get punctures, I got 2 or 3 more.
right.
The chances of
Yeah,
all of them being punctured are almost like would never happen versus a puncture on a bladder or a leak on a
yeah,
bladder and you don't catch it. And then also like you're just sucking on water like whenever
yeah.
I
It's easy
always
to.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
like the water fairy, it's never going to run out. Like I always when I pull out the water bottle, I know, okay, I have 6 more miles to go. I have 2 liters that I haven't touched, and I have a half of this liter, or oh man, I only have half a liter left. I need to ration it. Like, you always know how much
That's a
further you
good
have to
point.
go, and you know how much water.
Oh, I was just gonna say my boys have day packs with bladders, and I give my youngest a hard time because he having that mouthpiece right there. It's almost like he did the whole hike with a pacifier, and of
Yeah.
course, doing that, whether you're thinking about it or not, you're draining that puppy.
Yes.
So
And
just what you're
also,
saying,
you know, you do some hard hikes, I do some hard hikes. You're out in the middle of backcountry, like you're hiking, and let's say you're with a party. It's important for all of you to know how much water everybody has. Like, you had to give up water to some of your friends because they ran out. I've had to too. We should all know what each other always how much water we have.
right?
And
Very important.
yeah, so that's my soapbox, and I may have made a lot of
So
listeners
yeah.
mad, but like logically, like you can't argue with the logic, like
Nope,
having
you're right. And as I mentioned earlier, when that trip up Guadalupe Peak, it was sub freezing temperatures, and I don't know if it was the material. I have no idea, but the guy was up there, uh, right about ahead of me. His
yeah,
Camelback had frozen. Mine and my Nalgene bottles was fine.
yeah,
Not even starting to ice up. No, there could have been other factors, but he could not drink his water up there.
man. Mm-mm-mm. All right, Kip. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast. It's nice to catch up with you. It's nice to see your face and kind of reminisce of some of the amazing hikes that we had, and we definitely have to get together, and whether it's Paladuro, whether it's Caprock, if you ever want to through hike the Lone Star hiking trail, the longest trail in Texas, man, just let me know. I'll do it with you. It's an hour north of my house, 96.4 miles. um but yeah, it was wonderful to catch up. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to join the podcast. And
Yes. Well, Jason, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed this talk. It was a good catch up. I love your excitement, enthusiasm. From the first time I met you, well, before I met you, I knew knew all sorts of the Guadalupe mountain expert in my book, and just your passion. We were on that hike and you were talking about reading different books about the Guadalupe mountains and the
yeah.
history and this. I'm like, man, this guy, he's into this. And so that type of enthusiasm and just your passion. And so I thank you for having me. I've enjoyed talking, catching up, and being on your podcast.
Oh, I definitely wouldn't have started a podcast and not had on as a guest. So
Yeah, well, we definitely need to plan something for sure.
absolutely. Well, have a good one, and thanks again.
You too. You take care.
And that wraps up another exciting episode of the Trailblazing Texas podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode today, and stay tuned for our next episode where we will pick back up where we left off and guarantee to uncover many more hiking gems and share many more tips to enhance your experience on the trail. Until then, happy trails and happy hiking.